Y'all, when you were single, if you're married, or some of you are single now, there was a time that most of you, if you had your closest friend, said that, I got somebody I want you to meet, somebody that I want to fix you up with. And ladies, if that girlfriend said this, I want you to know this person, but I need you to know that they're a little bit of a bad boy. All right? How would you feel? Right? Fellas, same thing. Your partner, your partner in crime, so to speak. Hey, I found somebody I think you'd be interested in, but I need you to know she's a little bit of a bad girl. Right? Would you immediately just turn away? Oh no, let's end the conversation now. I don't want to know anymore if they're a bad boy or if they're a bad girl. Right? If you're honest, if you're not in church and you answer this question, it would pique your interest. You'd want to know more about them. What do they look like? What do they do? How'd you come to meet them? And it's funny how our society kind of takes bad and makes it a good thing, right? Saying I'm a bad guy, I'm a bad boy, doesn't mean I'm bad. It means something good, right? And being a bad girl, what does it mean to be a bad girl? It means, the stuff that people wear low, she might wear a little high. If he's a bad boy, that means he's a kind of a rebel, and he doesn't just line up with everybody, and there's a little bit of excitement about someone being bad. Now, why is that? Why is there an attraction, and not even just an attraction, a promotion of stuff that's bad? I want you to think about it. Some of the things that we will celebrate is when we get away with things, right? If you blew by a cop and didn't get pulled over, you might tell your friend, man, I was going about 70 miles an hour, and the cop pulled the person behind me over, right? And that's a positive thing. Or listen, let me tell you who to get your taxes done, right? We're coming up on the end of tax season, and I got somebody that really knows how to work the numbers, right? And that's a positive. Ooh, somebody, don't tell on yourself, y'all. Don't tell on yourself, right? But it's a positive thing, and we encourage it and we promote it. And it's funny how we love bad things, but does love really love bad things? And that's what I want to talk to us about this morning as we continue this series. Today our discussion is about bad love, right? And whether or not we should be loving bad things or not. So again, we're coming out of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we're going to be focusing on verse 6, but I want us to start at verse 4. And this is a letter written from a person named Paul. Paul had a life-changing encounter with Jesus, and he went from being a persecutor of churches to a planter of churches. And he's writing to a church that he planted that is having some issues, and they're having some problems. And then towards the back end of this letter, he starts to talk to them about the thing they need to pursue is really love. And starting at verse 4, this is reading at the New American Standard Bible, it says, love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong sufferer, and does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Y'all see that? So he's talking about now what love celebrates, what love promotes, what love gets happy about. It doesn't get happy about unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Now, I want you to understand why he's writing this, right? So if you ever read the letter of 1 Corinthians, I encourage you to do so. When you get to chapter 5, Paul is addressing an issue in the church that the church seems to be a little bit proud of. And he says, instead of being proud of it, you ought to be crying. You ought to be mourning. And it's an issue of sexual immorality. And he says it's a sexual immorality that not even the pagans do. And I need y'all to, let's just digest that for a moment, okay? So some people, you know, you may think our culture today is so far gone, they do and say anything. But I need you to know the first century was a little bit worse, all right? We see all sorts of things in our culture today, but they actually went a little bit further. I'll give you an example. Pedophilia was accepted, right? That's something none of us in our culture would accept. You know, it just kind of boils our blood to even thinking about it. But back then, that was just a common thing. It was seen as a rite of passage in the culture. So it was a very loose thing. But Paul says, y'all got something happening in your church that even the society around you thinks is wrong. And so what was happening? A person in the church was having an adulterous affair with his father's wife. That's what was happening. And it seems like the church was treating it as if it was okay, that they were boasting. And this would almost seem to fit what Paul has already talked about, love. And he's probably addressing this in case they're already interpreting what he said before, right? Because love is patient, right? It doesn't take into an account a wrong suffer. So you know, we're just being patient and we're just being forgiving. But Paul says, yeah, love does all of those things. But love should never feel right about wrong things. And because there's wrong things happening, you should have a different response. Now, you know, I encourage you to read 1 Corinthians chapter 5, because one of the reasons he talks about how you should address the wrong, because he says a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And so what is that a way of saying? If I can use maybe an analogy that's more in keeping with our times right now, right? With the COVID vaccine, we went through all sorts of things to try to limit infection. Right? And so we are asking people to get vaccinated. We're wearing masks and we're social distancing, trying to prevent infection. And he says, if you're okay with a little sin and you feel good about a little sin, you're going to facilitate sin being infectious. That it's not just going to be localized, it's going to spread. Because when you don't address something that's wrong, or you don't treat something that's wrong as wrong, there's a way in which you're actually promoting the wrong. He wrote about this to another church, a church in Rome, and he shows how God, how not addressing a wrong is actually wrong in and of itself. In Romans chapter 1, I want you to see this. In Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 29, and I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. He's going to talk about a whole lot of things that are sinful, talk about things that are wrong according to God. He says their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. He says they are backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, and boastful. They invent new ways of sinning, and they disobey their parents. They refuse to understand, break their promises, are heartless, and have no mercy. They know God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die, yet they do them anyway. And look at this. He says, worse yet, they encourage others to do them too. Y'all see that? It's saying treating wrong things as right is just as wrong as the wrong thing. The fact that you kind of turn a blind eye or you kind of wink at it and say it's okay, right? As a teenager, the fact that you can sneak in and out of your parents' house and your friends laugh and say, man, that's a good thing, that's not okay. If you can cheat on your taxes, if you can come to work late and be treated like you were there on time, that's not okay. And there are all sorts of ways, y'all, that we encourage the wrong thing by treating the wrong thing as if it was right. Think about how you define a good time. Man, I had a good time Friday night. Is that good the way God would define good? And so if we aren't communicating and having the same values that God would have on something, we are actually participating and promoting the wrong, right? I read about how men and women view friendship and how the values that they have in friendship. So here's an example that I read about. All right, so a man stayed out all night long and came home the next morning. And his wife asked, wait a minute, you were out all night, where have you been? And he said, well, I stayed over at a friend's house. So she called 10 of his closest friends, right? Same thing, I'm gonna tell you how to answer in a little bit. Same thing, a woman stayed out all night and said, I stay at a friend's house, and the husband called her 10 closest friends. Here's the difference in response. When the man called the wife's friends, they all said she wasn't there. But when the woman called the man's friends, 8 of them said he was there. And the last 2 said he was still there. Right? Don't do that in real life, y'all, okay? But it shows how there's a value in lying for a friend, right? That's a good thing, right? That's a close friend, the one that'll help me bury the body. But that's not a good thing about God. And the fact that I am okay with it says God is not okay with that person, but he's also not okay with me. Now, here's the thing, y'all. Society will define right and wrong based on what's convenient and what's good for society. But right and wrong is not penciled in. It's not an ad lib for us to write in what we think it ought to be. Right and wrong is defined by God. And we have to treat it wrong regardless of what society may define as wrong. Here's what Leo Tolstoy said about wrong. He says, wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority share it. So there's wrong. And God has a feeling about us treating wrong things as right. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20 says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. He says, woe to them, right? He's not happy about it. Let me tell you why he's not happy about us being okay with wrong or unrighteousness. When you see unrighteousness, think of something that's just not right by God. God is angry about it because it impacts something. It impacts truth. It impacts what's really true. No matter how small it may seem to us, it says something about what he's declared or what he's exemplified. And in Romans chapter 1, verse 18 tells us how God feels about unrighteousness. It says that the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all the ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Y'all see that? That right has a relationship with truth. And wrong, has an animus towards truth. It looks to put truth down. It wants to put truth's head underwater. And if we're going to be loving or love is siblings with the truth. Love can't sit back and see truth mistreated. And so for us to be okay with something that God is not okay with, saying we're okay that truth is pushed under a little bit more. And God's not happy about that. And so if God has a negative feeling about unrighteousness, then we should have a negative feeling about it. So now here's a question though. How do we respond? What do we do? So the text tells us, right, the first 6 says that love, it doesn't rejoice in unrighteousness, but it rejoices with the truth. Y'all remember that? What does it mean to rejoice with truth. Because we can misunderstand what's being stated here. I heard another story. Let me tell y'all another story. It was three guys that worked on a cell phone tower. One guy was named Cooter, one guy was named Jesse, and another one was KC. And they worked on this tower, and they were coming down the tower when Cooter slipped, fell, and died. And so KC and Jesse get down to the ground. It's like, man, what are we going to do? Well, somebody has to tell Cooter's wife. And so Jesse say, well, you know what? I'll do it. I'm real good with talking sensitive stuff. And so he goes, and after an hour, he comes back. And so Casey's waiting for Jesse to get back, and he sees Jesse get out with a big smile. And as Jesse's walking up to him, he starts popping a $100 bill to him as he walks out. Man, he said, look what I got. We can go out and celebrate. And KC is like, wow, you really are good with sensitive stuff. You mean to tell me that you went and told this woman her husband had died and she gave you a $100 bill? And Jesse said, well, not exactly. When I got there, I rang the doorbell. And when she opened it, I said, well, you must be Cooter's widow. And she said, sir, I'm mistaken. You're mistaken. I'm not a widow. And Jesse said, I bet you $100 you are. Horrible. What does it mean to actually celebrate the truth, right? That's not something you celebrate. That's not the truth we celebrate, all right? The reason I want to bring that out is because we can think by simply pointing out wrong is the way we celebrate the truth, right? A lot of church people really believe that, right? They excel in pointing out wrongdoing. Some of you in your marriages, one of you, at least one of you, excels in pointing out wrong, right? There you go again. You always do such and such. You never do such and such. And they highlight the wrong. And that's not the way we celebrate the truth. We celebrate the truth by promoting the truth, by encouraging the truth, right? It would have been one thing for God seeing all the unrighteousness of men to show up and just point out wrong, right? They have the whole law of Moses to do that. But he didn't come to point out wrong. He came to encourage right and to facilitate right. And so that's what love does. That's what the no ordinary love does. It even tries to encourage right even with wrong people, right? It's not that God doesn't love, right? He doesn't love the unrighteous things people do, but he loves unrighteous people. And he is encouraging unrighteous people to be loving and to love the truth. And so as agents of God, as children of light, we ought to be doing the same things in our relationships of encouraging the truth. Because let me tell you guys, if all you do is point out the wrong, all you do is tear the person down and tell them there's nothing right about you. There's nothing right about you. And because there's nothing right about you, there's nothing redeemable about you. And you're telling, sometimes you're telling them the wrong and you're hoping they're going to do right, but they're never going to do right because they don't think they can do right because all you do is tell them they do wrong. That happens with your spouse. That can happen with your children. Happens with you on the job. If you have an employer and all they do is point out what you don't do right and never acknowledge what you do right, how motivated are you to do anything? And so we can do the same thing in our churches, in our homes, in our communities. We have to be people who rejoice with the truth, who encourage the truth, who promotes the truth with those around us. That's what love does. Y'all, one of the biggest stories in the Bible that highlights this is about the prodigal son. Now, so in Luke chapter 11, Jesus tells 3 stories about lost things being found. And the first one deals with lost sheep, right? 1 sheep out of 100. And he leaves the 99 in the open field to go find the one. And when he comes back, what does he do? He invites the neighbors to celebrate. The second story is about a widow that had 10 coins and lost 1. Right? She sweeps the house clean to find the one. And when she finds the one, what does she do? She invites the neighbors to celebrate. Then we get down to a son, 2 sons. One wants to take the inheritance and go and squander it. And it would be right. It would be just, because a lot of times we want justice, right? When we see wrong people do wrong, we want to see justice happen. It would have been just for that father to say, well, whatever happens to you is good for you. Right? If you don't know the story, I encourage you to read it. But when the son comes to his senses, right, he's lost everything. And he's been feeding pigs, and the food that he ate was the pig food. And he comes to his senses, and he's coming back in humility. It would have been right for the father to say, well, why are you coming back now? Why don't you go back to your pig farm? Right? You disrespected me as your father. You took your inheritance early, and you were irresponsible with it, so you get what you deserve. But that's not how the father responded, right? He ran to him when he was a long way off, right? Not even when he was close in his repentance. He cut the distance, right? A lot of times, okay, if you've done wrong to me, you got to come all the way. You got to get all the way here and get all the way low before I even acknowledge you. I need you to apologize in every way I want you to apologize in my mind, because I'm not going to tell you because you don't deserve to be told. You just got to figure it out. And you got to do all of this stuff, and you got to make up for it. And I get to point it out and remind you year after year, week after week, month after month, what you've done. But you got to stick through that, and you got to come all the way. But the father ran. Before he could say anything, threw his arms around him and called for his clothes to be changed, for a ring to be put on his finger, and for a celebration to happen. All three of them involved a celebration. Not when they got everything right, but by the point in the fact that they understood the difference between right and wrong. That's the difference with being found and lost. The attitude to just come back was worth celebrating. And Jesus says, heaven rejoices over one sinner repenting. All of heaven rejoices. And so we have to have the mindset not to celebrate the wrong things of earth, but to celebrate the right things of heaven. And to do it the way heaven does it. It goes all out. And so what does that look like, y'all, in our day-to-day? Right? A lot of times if you're raising kids and they made a poor choice, they did something running with the wrong crowd, we want them to feel comfortable enough to tell us the truth. Right? Now, we'll say that, but we still have the punishment ready for them. And that's just, but that's not loving. The way God loves is he throws his arm around. Let's have a celebration. The fact that you're repentant of your sin has pleased me. Right? If there are consequences related to the action, we'll deal with them. But as far as you and I, you did the right thing. I didn't look to raise a perfect son or daughter. I want to raise a repentant son or daughter. That's what he wants from us. And so why should we have a level of rightness above God's? So I want to celebrate, even though you did a wrong thing. Even though you did sneak out at night, told your friends and got away with it, but you told me the next day, here's what I did. That's a good thing. You're moving in the right direction. Truth celebrates that. And if truth celebrates it, love likes to celebrate together with truth. And so those are the things that we want to have happening in our lives, in our relationships, of celebrating right moves. If a person makes a step of faith, start celebrating it. Congratulate them. Encourage them. Try to make it easier. If they're not just steps of faith, but just positive steps in their life. Love looks to celebrate it, to encourage it, to motivate it. I want you to think about how different would your life be if every time you made a positive step, somebody cheered for you. I want you to think about that. Where would you be in life? How would you think differently? How would you live differently? Some of you, maybe you've just started encountering that in your life. Well, think about it. You have the opportunity to facilitate in somebody else's life. Start in your home, in your church, at your job, in your school, of being that cheerleader of truth, being that cheerleader of righteousness. Because love likes to hang out with truth, and they like to go to the same parties. Truth loves right things. You know, one of my sisters in the faith, Her name is Hope. Some of you here, y'all know Hope. Hope's online probably right now. And she's one of our online Hopes. Hope and I met in doing student ministry. We were doing student ministry at Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church. And she was responsible for the middle schoolers, the junior high kids. And if you don't know Hope, Hope can be loud. Just being honest. Hope can be loud, but she's not always loud. So if you talk to her, it's not like she's overbearing. If she was teaching next door, it's not like she was necessarily louder than anybody else. But on certain occasions, you can hear Hope over a whole crowd. And let me tell you what some of those occasions are. When the kids were getting baptized, when that name would be announced, right? Their family is there, friends are there, but you were going to hear Hope over all those people. I'm just going to tell you the truth. At a basketball game, she go and watch a basketball game with the kids. And you got a whole crowd of people, all the other parents, and everybody's there, and they cheer. But when that child scored, caught, passed, kicked, or whatever, just got on the field, you were going to hear Hope. Right? If they came to our student ministry group, talked about a positive step with their homework. Listen, I got a B on my homework. Woohoo! She was going to yell out. You know, you could wonder, well, how is it that she's not a large lady by any means, could be so loud? Let me tell you why she was loud. She was loud because she never yelled alone. That when something good happened, Hope yelled, but so did love. And hope and love is pretty loud, but love always brings truth. And so even though there was one person in the arena, these three would get together and celebrate rightness. And it was louder than anybody else's celebration. And I'm just trying to encourage somebody. Listen, you can't always bring hope because hope is a person, but you have to always bring love and truth. And celebrate the rightness in the lives of those around you. Because listen, you got the biggest cheerleader rooting for you right now. How do you know you have the biggest cheerleader? He got on a cross to celebrate truth in your life so that you could not only see he was cheering you on, but you could feel and receive that kind of love from this day forward. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you to celebrate. I want you to be a partying kind. I want you to promote the right things in your life and in those around you so that we can end the bad love and have some right love in this world.